In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate the technique I use to sharpen my kitchen knives. And I'm going to compare it to two other methods. And I'm going to try and keep this as simple and as practical as possible and try and demystify this subject as much as I can with my simple, quick and easy method of doing it. I believe it's important to always use a sharp knife, because most often when I cut myself, I'm using a blunt knife and the knife slips off whatever I'm trying to cut and onto my finger, which is not good. So let's get on with it. Now the first technique I want to show you involves one of these, which is a simple pull-through sharpener, which has a couple of preset jaws, either of very hard steel or sometimes diamond. Right, you can see the two jaws there. Now normally with these you can either hand hold, some of them are hand held, but this particular one has got a suction underneath and you stick it on the table or the countertop. But be careful, put it right on the edge of the countertop, because on your pull through you don't want to cut your counter. So that's a bit of advice that's worth heeding, otherwise you can mess up your nice new counter. Now I'm going to use a knife that I'm not particularly fond of, because I don't really like what these things do to your knives. So all you do is keep all your anatomy out of the way, light pressure, and you pull through like that. You can hear that scraping noise as it's cutting away metal from your cutting edge. I'll do about 3 passes, and then with all of these techniques, the way that I check to see if I've got any sharpening is to drag my thumb across the edge like that, and I can feel a bit of a scraping feeling on my thumb. And it's important to go all the way. Over here it's not so sharp, not so sharp. Here it's pretty sharp. So now I know I have to concentrate on this area. So we'll just do a couple of passes there. That's better. That's pretty sharp now, and that was quick and easy to do. But if I do this now, I can feel that the edge, the cutting edge, is very rough, and that's not a good thing. You could finish off with a stone or something like that, but these are not intended for that. They're intended to be quick and easy, and I don't really recommend them unless you're out fishing or something like that, and you just want to quickly sharpen your bait knife or something like that. But if you want to keep some really decent knives in good condition, I wouldn't recommend these. So let's get on to our second method of sharpening, and for this I'm going to use what we call a butcher's rod. It's got various other names, but basically it's just like a file. If you feel it there, you'll feel some grooves, very hard metal. It's got a little protector here for your fingers, and it's about 9 inches long. Now these are designed to do minimal adjustment to your cutting edge. So basically you should use these virtually every time you use your knife. They're not designed for trying to sharpen a very blunt knife or anything like that, but they are pretty good at keeping a knife in good condition. They're not very aggressive, and the beauty of these compared to the pull through is that you can adjust the angle that you want. So you can try and match the angle that the manufacturer has put on the blade to start with. So by lifting the blade to about 10 or 15 degrees, that would probably be about right, and then you slide it along like that. I'll just demonstrate it to you. I prefer to do this standing up for some reason. I just find it awkward sitting at a table while I do this. So I'll just show you how it works. Now the beauty of this one is that you can set the angle as close to the manufacturer's angle of your blade that you can. So unlike the pull-through one where you have a fixed angle. So that's a good thing. So the first, you put the tip near the handle and you try and set your angle, and then you slide And as you're sliding, you're moving along the blade. Try and use as much of the rod as you can. And then do that a few times. If you only do this, you end up smoothing the rod in this area, and then it doesn't work very well afterwards. So that's why it's important to just try and use the whole rod sliding along like that. So that's doing one side. Now to do the other side, put the tip there again, put it underneath, and you slide, and always slide away from you. And I always like to sharpen with the blade moving away from the cutting edge. So the direction of motion is not towards the cutting edge, it's away from the cutting edge. And I just find that works much better. I find if I start doing this, I start tending to blunt the blade or change my angle or something like that. So I always move away, and obviously it's safer to do that too. So you could do 1, 1, 1, 1, or you could go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Try and do the same number on each side to try and keep your cutting edge in the center of your thickness of your blade. And then again, just check how sharp it is with your thumb all the way along. It's a little bit dull there. This is not too bad. So then you just concentrate where you find it's dull. That's a bit better. And you just feel with your thumb like that, just gentle pressure, but as you pull your thumb across, you feel it scraping, and it's like it's almost shaving your skin, and that's when you know that it's sharp. Finally, we get on to my preferred method of sharpening kitchen knives, and that is to use a sharpening stone. Now, sharpening stones come in various types. They all need lubrication, so either water or oil to lubricate them. Some of them you have to soak in water for a few minutes before you use them. Others you just put water on the surface or oil on the surface, and it'll be a light oil, even something like turpentine would be fine. The other thing is that sharpening stones come in various grits. Now, the lower the grit number, the coarser the grit. So a coarse grit would be about 350, 400. A medium grit would be 800 to 1000, and a fine grit would be 2000 to 5000. Now, I just use a cheap soaking stone, which has probably got about a 400 grit on the coarse side, and then if you flip it over, there's a fine side, and that's about 800 grit. This is my soaking stone. It's been in water now for probably about 10 minutes, and you can see the bubbles on the surface, and as it soaks in the water, so the water goes in the pores between the grit. And that's important because not only does your lubricant lubricate your blade going across the stone, but it also fills up the spaces so that they don't get clogged with metal filings, because once your stone is clogged with metal filings, it becomes slick and it doesn't work anymore. So very important to follow the manufacturer's instructions according to lubrication. Now we're just taking our stone out of the water. Don't dry it because you need that water on there for lubrication. And then what you need is a block of some sort with a little recess cut in it to hold your stone firmly. I find if you put your stone flat on the desk, what happens is there's no room for your hand to pass along, and the desk starts interfering with your glide through the sharpening process. So you need to keep your hands free. So now if you look at this, there's the coarse side, that's the coarse side, and this is the fine side here. You can see the two different colors of the grit. So we'll just start with the coarse side. You don't always have to use the coarse side. If your knife is reasonably sharp, then you just go straight onto the fine side and start sharpening there. But in this case, I want to just do a little bit on the coarse side, not many strokes, and then finish off on the fine side. So we take our knife. Now this is where my technique differs maybe from the textbook somewhere. This was taught to me by an old carpenter many years ago, and I've used it successfully ever since. What you do is you put your knife on the stone at about 45 degrees to the stone. I normally start on the tip, and you'll see I've got quite a high angle here, and that's because I'm trying to do the tip. If you have a very flat angle, your tip lifts off the stone and then it doesn't sharpen. So I normally start there, and you put a bit of pressure with your left hand, your fingers of your left hand, and then you move across the stone and down the stone at the same time, and you pull your knife across the stone at the same time. So there's a few movements going on there, and you'll notice as I get onto the flat bit, so I flatten my angle, so that the stone, it gets flatter as I get onto the straight bit, and a bit higher when I'm trying to do the curve, like that. And this all just comes with a little bit of practice. There's no hard and fast rule or anything like that, and I'll just show you in a minute what to look for. So you just do a few strokes like that, and then obviously you have to do the other side. Now some guys can change hands, but I just can't do that, so I do it with the I do it the other way, start on the other end, but the same motion virtually in reverse. And you'll notice I've got this on a rubber mat, because if this starts sliding around, then you can't use both hands while you're sharpening, and it becomes a bit messy. So put your block on a rubber surface or something like that, so that it keeps nice and still. So we do a few like that, and then again you check with your thumb how you're doing, and you'll start feeling what we call a burr on the end. If you've got your angles right, you'll start getting a burr. If you don't get a burr, that could mean that your angle's too flat and you're not contacting the cutting edge. So then you need to just steepen your angle a bit. If your angle is too steep, then you're going to start blunting the blade by taking away the edge that's already there. So you need to get somewhere in between. And what you do is, some people put a black felt tip pen color on there, but I prefer to just hold it to the light like that, and I can normally see where the metal has been recently worn down. It's nice and shiny, and if I see that I'm not touching the edge with my shiny bit, then I know I've got to steepen my angle a bit. If there's a thin line touching the cutting edge, then I could be too steep. So you want a reasonably broad area of wear, but it must involve the cutting edge. So that's what you're looking to achieve, and you just have to do it by trial and error, and fiddle around and do with your thumb as well. So I'm going to just do a few more passes with this, just to show you the motion. And just come back again, and you can almost hear the metal being worn away by the grit. Now I'm starting to feel a burr, and what that means is that I'm starting to affect the cutting edge and make it sharper. Now if you only feel the burr on one side, that means you need to do some work on the other side as well. So try and do the same number of runs on each one, just to make sure that your blade is worn evenly on both sides of the cutting edge. Otherwise you can't cut straight very well, you start cutting in a curve. That's looking good. The tip just needs a bit more work, and this is very often the case, is you have to just do a bit more work on the tip. Yeah, I can feel a burr all the way along there now. So now I just take this out of the stone, flip it over, and now I've got my fine grit exposed, and we'll do a few runs on the fine grit. And back again. That's pretty good. Just do a few more. This knife wasn't particularly blunt, but I'll just try and hone it a little bit further. Just give the tip a bit more. As I said, there's always a bit of a area that you miss. A bit blunt here. And again, try and use the whole length of your stone, otherwise you start getting a dish in your stone, and then that's very difficult to use after that. Now again, you notice I'm always going for what the tray, the cutting edge is always moving away from me. I don't like, some people advocate, and the textbooks advocate, you should do it both ways like that. I don't like that. I find if I start doing that, I start blunting after I've sharpened. So just my point of view, it's just my technique. It's you'll get other ideas from other people, but that's my findings, and it's been working for me for many years. So best is to experiment and see what works for you. Now that's pretty good all along. Now when I get to this point, I take my finger and my forethumb and my thumb, and I pull it gently across like that, and I can feel a slight bit of roughness there gripping my finger as I go along. So in the final stage, what I do is I've got a little hard Arkansas stone, and I just take it and I just rub like that along the edge, both sides, pulling the stone away from the edge. I never push it this way because, as I said, I don't like it when the knife travels with the cutting edge towards the direction of motion. I just find it tends to blunt it again. It doesn't work for me anyway. So there we go. So I'll just check that again. A little bit here. This stone takes off very little. It's just really a polishing stone. That's pretty good. And then the final thing I do, and this was also taught to me by the carpenter, just put it on a soft wooden surface like that and pull it through, just to take the final burrs off the cutting edge. And there we go, that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. Now finally, just a few words about how to look after your knives and keep them sharp and not damage the cutting edge. Firstly, never cut on anything harder than the steel blade of the knife. That means don't cut on marble, don't cut on glass, don't cut on a dinner plate. Rather use a nylon cutting board or a wooden cutting board. That's fine. And obviously don't cut straight on a laminated countertop, because not only will you damage your knife, but you'll also damage your countertop. So those are just a few points to remember to keep your knives in good condition. And then a word about storing your knives. I'll just show you how not to store them, and then I'll show you how to store them. Now here's a good example of how not to store your knives, because these knives are going to be bumping into each other, and the cutting edges are going to be clashing with other metal, which will slowly make them blunt. So this is not a good idea. Now a good way to store your knives is in a wooden block, because that protects the cutting edge, and wood being softer than steel, it doesn't damage the edge at all with you sliding it in and out. So those are good. The other thing you can do is have a special drawer for your special knives, so they're all on their own, and this particular drawer has got some padding in it, so that keeps them in really good condition. But it's a storage problem, so you won't be able to do this for all your knives. Now if you found this useful, please like and share this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. And if you have any comments or questions or any tips for us, we'd love to hear from you. If you scroll right down to the bottom, there's a comment section there. So leave us a message there and we'll get back to you. Thank you very much for watching.